So only recently I was listening to Mateus Asato playing some beautiful improvisations using thirds and sixths, double stops in the lines that he was creating, and I thought that would make a really interesting subject for a video. So what I thought I'd cover this week is how to visualise them, how to think about thirds and sixths, how they move up and down the neck when you play major scales, or if you're playing in position, how you can move them across the strings as well, how to think about that. And then finally, how I think about them within chords as well to start building lines out. So thirds and sixths themselves then. Now I actually think of these as being pretty much the same thing. And the reason for that is if I start by playing a third, so what's that? That's an A and a C sharp. If I take that C sharp and drop it an octave, so I've got a C sharp in the bass there, and I play my A again. So it's exactly the same notes, but this time it's a sixth. So a sixth is an inversion of a third, and if you've got that in your head, you can use them interchangeably. So a major third becomes a minor sixth, and a minor third becomes a major sixth. Okay? And I find that actually a little bit confusing when I'm playing, so I often just think of sixth as just being thirds with the third in the bass, and that's how I think about them. Now, one of the easiest ways of learning thirds to start with is to move them up and down, just a pair of strings, to understand how they move and how they transition as you move up and down the degrees of the major scale. So let's start there. So we're going to start with the thirds on the E and the B string, and there are really only two types. There's a major third and a minor third. And the major third looks like this, and the minor third like this. And the way I remember them, or an easy way of remembering them, is to think of a D major chord and look at the top two notes of that. That's the major third on the D major chord. And if you look at D minor third, the top two notes is the minor third, okay? Minor third and major third. So what I thought, a good way of learning these is to learn how to move up and down in key, just staying on the same pair of strings. So for example, if we stay in D major, the way I orientate myself is that lower note, this first shape, is the note that I use to establish the key. So that's on a D, so I'm going to work my way around D major. And as it's D major, not surprisingly, we start with that major third. Now above this position are two minor thirds, and below this position are two minor thirds as well. So that's easy. This first position is surrounded by pairs of minor thirds, and in fact all the minor thirds come in pairs when you work up and down the major scale. Okay? And surrounding these pairs of minor thirds are major thirds, so that means below that is a major third, and above this is a major third. And the final rule is, when you get to that major third below or above, just there are actually two major thirds, and then we go back to minor thirds again in a pair, and there you're in the root position. So working my way up, we have start with that major third, two minor thirds, a major third, and there are a pair of them, and then two minor thirds, and there's the major third again. So once you've committed that shape, that sequence to memory, you'll be able to play thirds up and down the neck on any pair of strings. Now if you move to the B and the G string, the tuning between these two strings is different, so the shapes are different. So your major third is two notes on the same fret, like that, and the minor third has this staggered shape, so there's a fret between them. And again, the easy way of remembering this is to look at your A major chord and look at the fingering of the major, the two notes are together on the same fret. And then the A minor chord, you've got that staggered shape. Okay? So, if you know that's your major third, and if we want to play in A major, there's my root note, which is on an A major, and then it just follows that pattern before. So, surrounding this root position are a pair of minor thirds. And these are surrounded by major thirds. And this one is a pair of major thirds, then a pair of minor thirds. Okay? It's as simple as that. Now the other strings just follow the same, as they've got the same tuning as the tuning between the E and the B strings, it's the same set of shapes. But once you've got this sequence committed to memory, you can find your way up and down the thirds on that pair of strings as well. Now the sixths, as I discussed before, you can think of sixths as being as a different inversion of a major third. And so, for example, if I start here, what I do this time is I choose that high note as my root note. So I want to play an E major, as that's my high note. And there's the third, but in the lower octave, so the sixth, so that's a minor sixth. And again, what I do is I think of my chords, so here E major gives me my shape for what would be a major third, an inverted major third, an E minor on the same fret for the minor third inversion. But once you know that, you can start to move these around just like you've moved the major thirds around. So I started with that inverted major third, then the minor third inversions. But it follows exactly the same rules as we've already learnt for the major thirds. And this is why I like to think of sixths as being inversions of a third, and then I just think about thirds. So that's between the E and the B, E and the G. Between the B and the D, it's exactly the same pair of patterns. Oops. Okay. Between the G and the A, the tuning is now a little bit different, so the shapes are a little bit different. So the inverted major third has a fret between them, and the inverted minor third are on adjacent frets. Yeah. And then the same between the D and the E string. Okay, so hopefully you can see how the shapes move across any pair of strings, how you can establish the key of the shape that you're playing, and then how you can build the shapes up around that. Now there's a couple of really nice easy exercises that we can do building on this and working on the glide, the transition between the notes. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so the first exercise, which is really useful, really works on that glide between the shapes. And so if I'm playing in C major, just there. What I do is I play the note and then I slide to the next position and let the strings ring and then play. Yeah. And see if you can create a nice sort of gliding legato line like that. You can do the same with the sixth as well. The other thing I like to do with thirds is to just put a little embellishment on. quite fiddly because your fingers are really quite bunched up, but again, you can move that up and down the neck and just get used to that as well. So that's moving up and down between a pair of strings. The next thing to do is to think about how you play them when you're staying in position, so how you move them across the strings. And let's have a go at that. So the other way of working with these thirds is to think transversely across the strings. And we're taking advantage of the learning that we've already done by just sliding the shapes up and down. So what I do is I think of a position to start with. Let's say I want to work in that position, so I'm in G major, 3 notes per string, but any scale shape will work, it doesn't have to be 3 notes per string. And you're using that as the guiding pattern for your thirds, so instead of playing individual notes, try to play thirds. And again, you can start working on that glide between them. Which is quite nice as well. And you can do exactly the same thing with sixths. Again, working across the strings, working on that glide as well. And finally, a really powerful way of thinking about these is to think about them in the context of the chords that they're used in. So if I pick on E minor, for example, let me show you what I think about when I'm playing around that. Okay, once you start thinking about these chordally, things start to get really quite interesting. So for example, if I'm playing upon that 12th fret, I might be thinking about this kind of E minor chord just there, or I'm in that pentatonic position. And when I've got that in mind, I can start thinking about the thirds that are in there. That bring out that E minor sound. Or the sixths just there as well. And obviously you can start to introduce the fourths and the fifths in there as well. So these are a really useful, powerful tool. They're great on a clean sounding guitar. They're actually really good on the acoustic guitar as well, because you can hit pairs of strings that much harder, they make that much more volume, the sound you get out is fatter. And so if you're trying to play an accompaniment to someone who's strumming a rhythm track against you, then using thirds and sixths, using double stops, is a really powerful way of making yourself heard over the top of it. So that's a great use for these as well. But like I say, experiment with them, see how you get on with them, and we'll chat next time. Goodbye.